Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in miniature, and it's Friday, which means we have another obscurity in literature. And this is an obscurity for sure, because this is the first time in, oh my goodness, what, 40 years since this book's initial publication that it actually shows up in English. And this is Miyazaki Hayao Shuna's Journey. I knew it existed because I can recall seeing it somewhere once in Japanese, and not really knowing what it was, thinking it was some kind of a Nausicaa tie-in, ripoff, prelude, something along those lines, but that's not actually what it is. This is an interesting little nugget of Miyazaki's, journey as an artist, and it's pretty cool that all these years later we finally get it, but it's definitely, I think, worth a good look-see. So yeah, first thing you'll notice is, well, I don't know if you can really notice, but based on the size of my hands, it's not like a huge, massive hardcover like we usually have here. This is kind of more in line with actually it's a little bit bigger than a traditional manga book, but, nice hardcover size. Smaller than a regular American comic, bigger than a traditional Japanese manga book, but it is read manga style, so you are going to read it backwards, technically. So, the first thing that's going to strike you is the colors, and that's because the whole thing was hand painted by Miyazaki back in like 83 or so. And yeah, there are some parallels to Nausicaa, but that's all they really are parallels. We have some of the, horrible people type, future rulers, Nausicaa is pretty much basically a post-apocalyptic manga anyway. That's not really the case here, but there's imagery for sure that is quite reminiscent of where he was going with that. I don't remember when Nausicaa was finally published. If you ever have a chance and you find it for a good price, I absolutely wholeheartedly recommend the manga. I have the big double volume hardcovers. I just don't want to get them out because they're big and heavy. What's interesting about this is it's not really exactly a comic. You'll see here that yes, we do have panels, but it's what I would more consider to be an actual graphic novel. While there are sequential moments, it's more just telling the story, and the text kind of flows with it. I mean, obviously Miyazaki did have a background in manga art, so that's not all that surprising. You can see various similarities to a lot of the clothing, the animals, the Yakul, I think he is. Little mount looks very reminiscent of some of the animals I think we saw in Mononoke. But we have our prince here, Prince Shuna, as he sets off on his journey. Obviously, I'm not telling you anything about that, but again, just look at the artwork. I always have enjoyed Miyazaki's watercolors, and I mean, you can just see the man had a really good eye for layout, always has. So this is quite cool to see. We enter the second chapter. And obviously, I don't want to spoil too much of it. It does get into some interesting stuff. We're not going to tell you what exactly. And one of the things I like about this book, besides the fact that it is a little bit short, and I guess it is a single volume that we'll get to the ending and show you guys in a sec here. But again, we have our cultures and societies that are just, all about industrialization and technology. And obviously our friend Shuna here does not necessarily agree with their practices. So, things happen, he meets some girls, decides, and they almost look like the protege of both young and old Nausicaa, that we are going to meet again as the story continues. Cool looking bad guys. The back cover, and as Shuna goes on his quest, and I'm not going to show you a whole lot about that, but there's some neat scenes here as he descends into the land of the gods. I was going to say, at one point we do see some actual manga layouts. There's some action scenes. I forget where they are. Here we go. We have a whole little sequence where they're trying to kidnap him and stuff. Very reminiscent of some of his manga works. But again, just the layout, the sense of scale that you see in some of these images. And there's some neat ones like that throughout the book. Obviously, I'm not going to show you them all, and I'm going to skip over everything where we see what's happening. And then we meet up with those girls that he met earlier. Things happen, which I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about. But this was always the interesting thing at the end here. His journey was not over. So you can see it's a bit dated. But that's the cool thing about books like these. Who knows, maybe someday he'll want to revisit it. Maybe he'll want to do something more with it. There's definitely some interesting works of Miyazaki's from around that time. He was definitely dabbling in some interesting stuff. I forget, I know there was one of the more underground type American artists he was working on with the dog-headed soldier. I feel like it was Corbin. I want to say it was Richard Corbin. I'm just drawing stuff out of thin air here, but it feels like it. Anyway, you know, a nice little book. Compact, nothing overtly offensive, gross, violent. I think if you have any family or friends that are fans of Miyazaki's, this is a nice little gift. I mean, yeah, the price, well, the MSRP here is like $28. Would I pay that? Did I pay that? No, I didn't. Would I? Probably. But I'm a sucker for his stuff. You know, I've got most of his stuff on either Blu-ray or going back to the very original release of Totoro in English when Troma put it out, and it had, honestly, I think the best dub it ever had at that time, with a lot of veteran voice actors that sounded quite familiar from Streamline stuff. But yeah, I wore that videotape down to its core to the point where it just disintegrated, showing many generations of students at the end of the year, because Disney was not going to get a hold of me, especially not on the last day of school. But I know they couldn't get a hold of that because they didn't have a license to it at that time. So yeah, anyway, cool stuff. Since this is pretty new in fresh in print, you should not have too many complications in tracking down a copy, at least in the English speaking sphere. I'm kind of curious because there's some mentions of previous manga that Miyazaki was doing in the 70s. I have never come across those, and if you guys have any links or ideas of where to find that stuff, because I don't even think I've seen it. I've seen like illustrations and spot work he's done here and there in magazines throughout the 80s and 90s and so on, but I don't think I've seen anything earlier than a lot of this, or like his work that he was doing with the anime studio. So if you guys have any leads there, I would love to follow them up. Doesn't matter if they're in English, Japanese, heck, even French. Hook me up, hook a brother up here, right? So yeah, with that said though, this has been I, Lord Tamberlane, with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.